Live. We're live. Hello, everybody. Gio and Joey back together. Joey was sick last week, so I did a 14-minute video that you can see on our channel about sad atheists and the fact they're not even talking about the evidence. But Joey, how you doing? Feeling better? And let the
Doing better
audience
and
know. Hold on.
and
Let
doing
the
better than
audience know. Let the audience know what we're going to talk about too. Go ahead. How you doing?
yeah. So I'm doing better than I deserve, and definitely better than last week. Um, so this first story that we're going to talk about, I think it's actually really important. It was actually brought to my attention by Bree Smalls from Fear Me It's Bree. She's been on our podcast before, but I don't see enough people on the right really talking about this. So I found that a little disturbing. Right, I'm hoping that the Daily Wire guys will dive into it with their audiences this next week. But it just really concerns me because it's about one of our fundamental rights, the Second Amendment. So,
Yeah, the
and
the
then
bill the bill we're going to be talking about is S 3589, Preventing Private Paramilitary Activity Act of 2024, and we'll get into that. And what's a second notion we're going to be looking at?
yeah, so why is our society at a standstill? Why is young men not feel like they have anything to do, right? So there was a conversation that the Daily Wire guys had last week on their backstage about just how the spirit of exploration, which is so key, particularly for men, has just kind of been beaten out of us as a society. And so we'll kind of dive into that and hopefully have some solutions about things we can do right in our own small way to inspire a vision for the future.
Vision for the
And
future.
and I
Go
just want
ahead.
to clarify to anybody watching, I am not a pastor and I'm not going to be a pastor. That's Geo's realm. But I was at a youth event with my church and I won this free hoodie. And I'll always take a free hoodie.
Free is always in the budget unless it's sexually transmitted disease.
Well,
and
unless
you
you're in
should,
California.
yeah, and you shouldn't be having intimacy unless you're married anyway, but that's a different story for a different day. All right, so let's look at this bill. I'm going to put it up on the screen and you let me know exactly if there's anything you want me to highlight. But nevertheless, here is the bill, and it's, as I mentioned, Preventing Paramilitary Activity Act of 2024. So, exactly in your own words, Joey, tell us what the issue is this, because I did review it, I did look at it, I got my own opinions, but this was your little topic and I'm glad to share it. But what exactly is your concern?
Yeah, so well, first of all, we're Americans, right? So, some American history. The Continental Army was not the only force fighting the British in the Revolutionary War. Actually, a good portion of the fighting was done by private militias. Remember Paul Revere's ride? What was he doing? He was riding from town to town, telling people the British are coming. They're coming to take your guns, so be ready, right? That was kind of the whole concept that started this country. Was the idea like the government's coming to take away the guns because they knew that the people could form together into a militia and defend. And if we look at the Second Amendment, right, there's two clauses, right? So it says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. That's the first clause. And then the how to that clause is the second part where it says, so the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So in other words, the right of the people to have arms is so that a militia can be formed if necessary.
So let me back up here before we speak about the details of this video. Why do you think, or what do you think is the motivation behind all these Second Amendment gun grabs? Right? It seems like they're hell bent on curtailing the Second Amendment. From a bird's eye view, what do you think is behind all of that?
Well, I think there's two things. One would be the more well-meaning, right? So we all see these mass shootings that are increasing, see, children are killed, and rightfully we're outraged and we want to do something to stop them. I think that's natural. I think we should want to do something to stop them. But then, so that's the well meaning side. And obviously, I don't support taking people's guns away to stop mass shootings because listen, if criminal, it's been said a million times that it's become cliche, but if criminals followed laws, they wouldn't be criminals. So one more law isn't going to stop that. But that's the well-meaning side. Then on the other side, I mean, I just think it's the age-old question that's like central planners, right? Government tends to be to centralize, and people that want to centralize power don't like a free people, right? A free society. Because listen, if you have a free society, you can't, you people may not want to go along with the central planning. And so I think there are people in positions of power who see um, who see aspects of America's gun culture, something that I'm a part of and I support, and I think it's a good thing. But they see that and they see that that's less governable in a sense. And so I think those are the two motivations. One that I'm a little bit more sympathetic to, even though I ultimately disagree with their conclusion. And the other, I'm like, nah, man. If you want that, go back to Europe with that nonsense. This is America.
Yeah, I agree. You know, it is. I wish there was a way that we could live in a society with no guns, right? In the sense that everybody got along like we're going to live in heaven, right? Nobody's going to need weapons up there. But I also live in reality. And I think when you look at countries that have removed the citizens, the guns from the citizens of their country, for a period, it doesn't bode well. Yeah, granted, countries like Australia and other countries may seem to be better off, but a neutered animal, a neutered dog, is never the same. And to take away a fundamental right that is enshrined in the Constitution. By the way, speaking of which, have you did you hear what Hawaii has done?
Yeah, basically that the spirit of aloha transcends the constitutional right to bear arms, which I'm really hoping, and I think the Supreme Court will take that on and shoot it down. But for all of our fellow Americans in Hawaii, yeah, no, to answer a question, no, the spirit of aloha does not transcend the Constitution. Sorry.
And think about it. Look, if the spirit of aloha transcends the Constitution, what is going to stop the spirit of, let's say, the state of California or New York or Texas to say the spirit of our age trumps the Constitution? If everybody can trump the Constitution, then you really need to hunker down, bunker down, make sure you have your weapons and protect, because it'll just become the wild, wild west out there.
Yeah, so there was something. So I had a conversation a couple weeks ago when the whole border dispute with Texas. First person I seen with one of my political science professors, who's more on the conservative side, and I was just like, "So what do you think about this?" And one of the things he was saying is like, "Listen," and he totally. I was let's just say this: it gave me hope that there are still good professors in academia. But one of the things he said is like, listen, part of this mass migration thing, right, is there are people who don't like the American spirit, right? Because and then he told a story. So he's like, listen, they're trying to import a people who aren't enculturated in the American ethos. And there's a story he told about so the famous sociologist Max Weber, and he would teach students, and he was teaching some German students and American students, and one thing he said is like the German students were better in some ways academically, right? But he's like there was one thing about the American students that none of his other students, particularly his German students, had, is that the American students, and this was his words, Weber's, were freer, right? The Americans were more likely to ask tough questions of their professors, to push back about parts of their paper. Like there's just something in the American DNA that is free, right? That wants to be free men and women. And in the past, this was the great thing that we inspired the world with, right? In other words, constitutional government didn't really exist for most of human history. And America was really the first successful attempt at this self government thing. And I think there are those, and I think this applies to this bill, and this applies to many other efforts in our society that want to stomp out that spirit. And I like something Andrew Clavin says. He's like, listen, the Constitution and our republic may go, but he's like, the last thing you'll see as it sinks below the sea is my hand, right, gripping the side of the boat. So that's me. But there was,
Go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say. So one thing about this bill specifically, and I think the
Okay,
biggest
okay.
danger of,
Hold on. Before
okay,
we jump into the bill, I wanted to talk about the immigration thing because we are going to get to the Daily Wire backstage. We're not going to necessarily hit this topic, but they did talk about it. And it's the fact that it's not that you and I are opposed, or at least I don't believe you are opposed to legal immigration, right? We understand that this country is the greatest political country, the place where you can achieve your dreams. And so, both of us having some Hispanic roots, myself, my father immigrating here, becoming a success, having at one point a factory that employed over 250 people, we're not opposed to legal immigration. But this massive immigration, this uncontrolled immigration, this lack of governing our own borders is dangerous because you're diluting. And I like how they said on the Daily Wire, we can assimilate one or two immigrants, right? They were just using an example. But if you bring so many over, they can't assimilate to our culture, our pathos, our way of doing things. And contrary to our liberal friends, right, who want immigrants from South America, conversely, they don't like immigrants from Cuba because Cuban immigrants understand the dangers of socialism and communism. They are fleeing from that. And so when we get too much immigration, it begins to dilute what we stand for, which then, bringing it back full circle, brings back to people who support the type of bill that's trying to pass. And as you were alluding to, what are the dangers of this bill for us freedom loving people?
yeah. So I think there's a lot of dangers to this bill. The biggest thing about it is it's very broad. The terminology they use, the descriptions, the definitions they use for different things are very broad. So like what exactly is encompassed by paramilitary organization? Obviously, by the language they're using, what they want to convince in people to get the fear response so people will support the bill is they want you to think of, say, some white nationalist group who's training to try to terrorize black churches.
Mm.
Um, but they don't say that specifically, right? We could pass a bill. I mean, I don't think we need to pass a bill. It's already illegal to terrorize black churches. It's already illegal to, there's multiple hate crime laws and stuff that already cover white nationalism. So I don't think we need a new bill
Mm.
anyway. But if they wanted to address that, they could have specific language, but they use broad language. So a point, like I said, Bree, who turned me on to this bill, made is like, what if your church has a security team and the team meets to plan contingencies to know who's going to be where? Are they training for paramilitary activity? Could
Mm.
be. What about maybe we'll pull this up later? But the rooftop Koreans from the 1992
I could
LA,
try to get it on. Go ahead, keep talking. Yeah, I'll get
yeah.
it on.
So the 1992 LA riots, when the city descended into anarchy, there were these based, awesome Korean shop owners who are like, nah, man, we're gonna protect our businesses. We're gonna protect our families' livelihoods. Yeah, the rooftop Koreans. Look at these guys. I love them. I love the guys just standing there like,
Yeah, I know. So here's some pictures that I want the audience to see, right? So here they are. And let me just get through the pictures. But you see them? They are well armed. They're on their rooftops of their stores. Here he is one protecting his store. They have Glocks they're looking at, and they are protecting themselves during the riot. So tell the audience why exactly they were doing this and what will this bill potentially prevent them if they should need to do this again?
yeah. So, well, in 1992, there was the Rodney King incident with the police. Um, and LA just descended into a lot like the 2020 BLM riots, the George Floyd riots. This was kind of the precursor to that in '92, and LA descended into anarchy, right? And eventually, the National Guard was called in, right, and order was restored. But in the meantime, businesses were torched, places were gone. And so these Korean immigrants, right, these were a good example of immigration because they assimilated themselves into the American pathos, right? And they're like, no, like we came here for the American dream. This was our American dream to start these businesses, and people aren't just going to take that from us and our families. And so they defended their property with firearms. Now, and you know what? There was some coordination to this. And so in this bill, when it talks about like training, if we go back to the bill, let me see the part. It said, where did it say it? Sorry. It says if you unauthorized, yeah. So under S 2742, it says unauthorized private paramilitary activity, Section A, offense. It shall be unlawful to knowingly, in a circumstance described in subsection B, while acting on part as part of or behalf of a private paramilitary organization and armed with a firearm, explosive, or incendiary device or other dangerous weapon. First of all, what a ridiculous term. What kind of weapon isn't dangerous? That's the whole concept of a weapon. But it says, okay, so these are the things that shall be unlawful as part of a paramilitary organization. It says to publicly patrol, drill, or engage in techniques capable of causing bodily injury or death. Number two, interfere with, interrupt, or attempt to interfere with, or interrupt government operations or government proceeding. Listen, that one I tend to agree with, obviously. Like I said, not everything
Yeah,
in the
but
bill
wait
is
a minute.
bad.
Obviously, when it comes to bills, the devil's in the details, right? They try to get you to agree with most of it, and then they slip in the details. But look, you're reading number 2, where it says interfere with, interrupt, or attempt to interfere with or interrupt government operations or government proceeding. I tend to agree with that. But what about the Boston Tea Party, right? You know, the fact that sometimes we have to stand up to tyranny. You know,
Oh, so I agree with
yeah,
you,
how do we
and
balance that?
well, but here's the thing. Um, the British government was a tyrannical force, right? In other words, the people were being taxed without representation. But listen, so in other words, the act of burning the tea, any government would have to have that as an illegal act. But because the government was unjust, that's why they were justified in disobeying the law. Um, another example of just civil disobedience, right? Martin Luther King, right? When he was opposing segregation, he broke the law and he got arrested for it. Now, here's the thing: the thing about civil disobedience is it by
Necessity.
necessitation, yeah, whatever
Necessity.
the word is going to be against the law, and
Hmm.
it's you violate it because the law is unjust, right? So yes, I believe that if you have a legitimate government, you're not just going to let people disrupt government proceedings, but if your government then becomes illegitimate, it then becomes the duty of the patriot to violate that law. So that's why I don't necessarily have a problem with the wording of that part. So that first one that I read though, publicly patrol, drill, or engage in techniques capable of causing bodily injury or death. Well, there's a church scenario that I talked about, right? If they're planning for the contingency of some mass shooter coming in their church, they're planning to do activities that would cause bodily injury to the person who's attempting to do that to the church. So that could be another problem with the bill, major problem. Then number three, it says to interfere with or intimidate another person in that person's exercise of any rights under the Constitution. That one I would say is a good one, a good part. But then,
Yeah,
okay, so here's
but hold on. Look, I'm just playing. I'm pushing back here a little, even though I see, because a lot of this wording is depending on who's interpreting the wording, right? You and I will read that and we would interpret that right. But with these snowflakes, right? These snowflakes, people saying, "Oh, the fact that he has the ability to carry a weapon is going to intimidate me." Well, mind your business, right? And so
yeah,
we have to.
exactly.
It has to. It all depends on who's interpreting these laws.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Um, and then so number four says assume the functions of a law enforcement officer, peace officer, or public official, whether or not acting under color of law, and thereby assert authority or purport to assert authority over another person without a consent of that person. Well, there goes the rooftop Koreans, right? They
Hmm.
were assuming the duties that would normally be ascribed to a police officer. Um, and this part really got me here. So it says train or engage in any activity described in paragraphs 1 through 4. So they're not even just outlawing those things, right? Outlawing the church safety group or security group or the rooftop Koreans protecting their businesses. Even training to be able to do those things now could count as a criminal offense. So, say you have a group of buddies who go to the range together to be prepared, right? Could that now be considered training for paramilitary activity?
I
I
wonder,
think the
for example, a couple of years ago, I took a self defense training with a group of people where we roll on the ground
you right wing
and
extremist.
shoot underneath from underneath a car and shoot from through a windshield. Because a couple of years ago, what was happening? All these riots all over the place, and you have to be able to defend yourself, especially when I drive around with kids, my 3 kids and my wife in our car. And so, would that be considered right under these vague languages? That would seem to be considered going against the tenets of this bill, and that is scary.
Yeah. So, and then scrolling down here, right under exceptions, in number 3, it says, so students in an educational institution authorized by the federal government or state to teach military science as a prescribed part of the course of instruction when under. So, yeah, there. Okay. Well, we'll allow you to have some exceptions, right? We'll allow you
Mhm.
to, under the authority of the federal government. Well, that kind of defeats the purpose of the Second Amendment, which is so that the people have the right to defend themselves potentially from the federal government if necessary. So yeah, this is just the
So
biggest.
go ahead.
Oh no, no, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, yeah. No, to summarize for the people who will view this later, to summarize, the danger of this bill is that it's trying to undermine constitutional rights, the ability to not be living under a surveillance state, really, because we should be able, if a neighborhood, like I live here in Texas, I live in a very neighborhood where there's a lot of conservative people. We could probably form our own militia with how many weapons are in this neighborhood. And nobody, as long as we're not criminally trespassing anybody's rights, why should the government care what we do? Right? As long as we're under the local rights of how to properly use a firearm. If 5 of us, 10 of us want to get together, go to a shooting range, or even if we have here citizen neighborhood watch, right, where if somebody calls, we run over and help. According to this bill, that may be in jeopardy, and that is scary because they leave it intentionally vague, like a Rorschach test. So you're going to apply it, or they can apply it however they seem fit. And obviously, it's always going to apply against conservative leaning people, never against liberal leaning people.
Yeah, no. So I agree with everything you said, and one of the main reason I wanted to bring this up and I wanted to talk about it. Again, I'm not seeing a whole lot of people that I follow on the right talk about it. Like I said, this bill passed my attention until Bree brought it up in our, this group chat that we
Mm-hmm.
have. And so I wanted to raise it to people's attention and listen, call your congressman, call your senator, call them multiple times. Be respectful because you're never going to get anywhere if you call just to cuss
Yeah.
them out. But let them know your problems with this bill and, write some letters. Get people in your community, in your church, in your family, in your friend group. Get them to call and to write, right? Let's not let this bill just because if this bill gets passed, I mean it's going to be a major threat to our constitutional way of life. And listen, and to self governance, self reliance, and the core American spirit of we are a free people and we want to stay that way.
So let me ask you a question. Do you know when it's going to a vote? It talks
I
about here
don't, I do,
January 16, but that's when it was introduced, January 16. So yeah, we have to. We'll keep the audience posted, and
Hope,
perhaps future
hopefully,
episodes.
hopefully, while Speaker Johnson's in charge, he just won't bring it to the floor. I can't see Johnson bringing this to the floor. But like I said, if Republicans were to lose Congress in November, this is a real threat. So this is something we need to be keeping our eyes on as patriots and as conservatives. Um, yeah. So don't sleep
Okay.
on this, guys.
Yeah, no doubt, because we need to protect our Second Amendment, the Constitution. First, we need to protect the Constitution, period. And obviously, this one is against the Second Amendment. That being said, we're going to switch gears here and talk about our buddies in the Daily Wire. That being said, Joey and I have an announcement. We are starting a podcast that is 100% centered on the Daily Wire. It's going to be called Wire and Faith, where we take the content of the Daily Wire that deals with religious issues and we're going to break them down, give it our own spin, because our spin is the correct spin. Well, I'll explain what I mean by that one day. But right now, we are going to look at the Daily Wire, their backstage. And Joey, set us up. What are we going to be looking at specifically before we break it down?
Yeah, real quick, just on what you were saying before. So that other podcast that you and I are going to be started, that's part of the Rewire, the Daily Wire Friends community, which is this awesome community that was started based on a group chat on Twitter, and by our fearless leader Donnie Dossie, who he is the working man's Andrew Breitbart, is what I like to call him. He's just bringing ordinary conservatives from across the country and even across the world with our buddy Ben, together and just to speak our minds about the craziness in society. So definitely go over and check out Rewire.
And we're not sure when we're going to launch it, but we'll keep you guys posted. All right, so let me show this video and you let me know when to stop it, when we can chime in with our own understanding.
Screwdriver.
Yeah.
Capitalism, for what it is the greatest thing. And guess what? It's not everything, right? It's great for the thing.
That's the trick, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Doesn't it
Yes,
sometimes
that's why I'm not
become an idol?
that's why I'm not an Ayn Rand libertarian,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But what capitalist markets are good for is, for example, things like assimilating new groups of people into your country.
No,
so one
yeah.
of the, I mean, if you look at the history of immigration in the United States, what you see is major waves of immigrants who must assimilate, because if they do not assimilate, they will not have welfare dollars, because there are no welfare dollars. When my great-grandparents got here in 1907, my family's been here for 120 years. When my great-grandparents got, on both sides, got here in the early 20th century, they spoke Yiddish, and within about 5 years, they didn't speak Yiddish no more. And none of their kids spoke Yiddish, because they immediately picked up on the idea that you have to engage in a trade. You have to become more American. You have to actually imbibe from this well. And so we've undercut in this country all of the fundamental bases for a growing and thriving.
You know, something he said that is interesting that even played out in my own family. My parents are divorced, unfortunately, but I was raised by my stepmother, who I love, who I consider an angel in flesh. But the difference between my father and my biological mother is that my dad did everything to assimilate to the culture. He learned English, even though his English was never, the greatest. You could tell he was a foreigner. But my mother never did learn the language. And unfortunately, if you just comparing it, they both love me. I love them both. But my dad had the American success that my mother never did. And that's because he threw himself into the culture, what Ben is talking about. He became, what's the word I'm looking for? Cognizant of how things operate here in the United States. And without losing his moral compass, he became a success to the point where he had a factory that employed over 250 employees. And it was what provided for my brothers and sisters and siblings from 1984 all the way till he retired back in like 2008. No, 2015. And so that's the American dream, and that's what we need to look at. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that the assimilation part is key. And the reason why in recent years I've become pretty hawkish on immigration, even though I'm not morally opposed to immigration in theory, but we have lost in our country the ability to assimilate people because our mainstream culture in America is not interested in assimilation, right? Like, listen, my dad, Puerto Ricans are a little bit different because Puerto Rico's technically part of the U.S.
Yeah.
But when my dad moved to New York, right, he had to learn English to go to school, right? And like the culture didn't um, adjust to Spanish speakers or to other, because they had to adjust to the mainstream culture. But this is one thing I see now, like everything is in like 5 languages. Every warning, every sign. I'm like, no, like that's not the way it should be. Right? Like we should speak a common language. Now, I think it's good to be bilingual. I think that's a great thing. But no, the common language in America is English, and everyone should learn to speak it. What were you gonna say?
No,
You
no,
look like you
no.
went.
I mean,
Oh,
because I could hear some liberals saying the United States doesn't have an official language. Yeah, we may not have an official language, right? But we do have a common language, and it's English. And learn. And look, and I'm Hispanic, and I remember the first time I went to Miami back in the early 80s, like all the signs were like, yes, we speak English. Well, you better speak English, you know what I mean? Because all the stores were in Spanish. But you're in the United States, man. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Have we forgotten that? And look, and I love my Hispanic heritage, but I also love the American ideals, the American culture, the American pathos that has created the greatest country from an earthly standpoint that the world has ever seen.
yeah, and one of the places where this gets the most, I think, just irritates me the most, is there are some states that now will have bilingual ballots for voting. I'm like, no, man, if you can't even learn our language, you shouldn't be voting in our elections. I'm sorry, that may be an
Mercy.
unpopular opinion, but
Yeah, exactly.
and so kind of on this too. So I don't know if you watched the Super Bowl, but how did the Super Bowl open up? Right, it had, and this
Yes, don't
isn't
get me
to do with
started
immigrants,
with that.
but
Yes.
they had a black national anthem and then a regular one. Well, I like, so Andrew Clavin did his little satirical bit that he does at the start of all of his shows. He's like, well, apparently, he's like, I did care about the plight of my fellow black Americans, right? But he's like, but I learned at the Super Bowl that apparently they live in some other country, right? So they can't appeal to constitutional rights of Americans if they belong to a different country. And then I like what Michael Knowles said. He's like, listen, he's like, my black friends don't have a black national anthem. They have the American national anthem. But he's like, you can't have two nations living on top of each other. We have to
and
have
you know,
some kind of.
and my sarcasm was, all right, well, you want to go down that road? Where is the Spanish national anthem? Right? Why do blacks get their own national anthem? And then obviously, if you get the Spanish national anthem, then why not the French and the Korean and the Japanese and the Greek and the Italian? All of a sudden, we have none of the ideals of American. Look, one of the beauties of our country is that we are Americans who do not lose our cultural identity. But overarching is the fact that we are Americans and there is a way we go about our business. But that doesn't mean that I lose my Hispanic flavor. That doesn't. But there's an overarching theme or an overarching pathos that makes this the greatest country in the world and the only country I would fight for. But now I think it takes away from the struggle that our African American brothers have had when people are dividing us based on national anthems now. We're all Americans or should be. Yeah, so go ahead.
So I was just gonna say, so for anybody who happens to listen to this who thinks, oh, you're just a bunch of right wing bigoted extremists, I wasn't able to find the
Well,
quote, but in Barack Obama's book Dreams from His Father, he literally wrote a line about how that the nativist in him, when he goes down to these protests and he sees Mexican, and this was in what, this was pre-presidency when he wrote this, but he's like, listen, when he goes down to these protests and he sees people flying Mexican flags and waving the banners of other countries, he's like, something in him just like gets irritated at that. And
mhm.
so this never used to be the kind of thing that has to be partisan, right? In other words, we all used to fly the same flag. We all sang the same national anthem. We were one people, right? What does our money say, right? E pluribus unum, out of many, one. Or Ronald Reagan's line. He's like, listen, you can move to France, but you can never become a Frenchman. You can move to England, you'll never be an Englishman, but you can move here and become an American. But the important part of that is become an American, right? Yes, you can have your culture. Listen, I love Puerto Rican food, right? I'm glad that we have Mexican food and Colombian food and Italian food and French cuisine, right? I'm glad that that's here. That kind of cultural variety is great. But there has to be something that unites us, right? A spirit. Again, I think it kind of goes back to our first segment, but a spirit of being a free man and woman, recognizing the rights that we have, ultimately not from government, but from God.
Yeah, and like Tim McDonough in their #1 hit single with Ben Shapiro, which we got to talk about that here towards the end. We used to fly American flags, and now it's all BLM and rainbow, right? And we need to get back to the fact that what protects the BLM and what protects the rainbow is the American dream. And if we can't protect that as #1, then try flying that flag, either of those flags, in Gaza. See how that goes for you, right? And that's the irony, that they're undercutting the very freedoms they are protesting again. Let's continue here with the video.
Supporting new blood from a young.
I think what Drew touched on is actually really, really important, and it's also very true. We're tracing the kind of the decline and decay of American culture. I agree that you trace it back to the end of the space age, because there's also this. There is this need to actually explore, like, physically, and you find that you had the exploration age in the 15th and 16th century, early 20th century. It shifted to the polar exploration. They were going up to the ice in the North Pole or Antarctica, and just kind of like people were dying, and it was horrible. But you're just doing it because we have to discover something. And then that shifted to, like, let's go to the moon. Like, we have to go somewhere and discover something. And then we just shut all that down.
Saturn by 70.
And the whole thing about growing.
Women, by the way, I was talking about this the other day. It's incredible. Men have this need in your nature to, like, want to conquest.
Yeah.
Like, what? How does this work? How do men are engineering? It just comes very naturally to men. And, like, what's out there? What's in the woods? Why is a tornado coming at me? Women don't have the same instinct. So it's fascinating to hear you guys talk about this. Like, but literally, there's a reason men conquered the world, right? There's a reason for it, because it's just naturally what you're predisposed
You have two
to.
boys. You can
We're
see
like,
little
I'm like down to be in an Amish community and just raise some kids, learn how to bake bread. But you guys do you and figure out how to go to space.
And now I say we're also going in reverse, because what's happening is we've stopped exploration, and at the same time, we're turning back and either denying or expressing regret over the exploration we already did. We're apologizing for the conquest of America.
I think.
I love this clip, right? So this is something, listen, so to everyone watching, Gio and I, we're social conservatives, so we talk about the degeneracy and the things we're against in the culture all the time. But here's the thing, and we need to do that. We need to call stuff out. But at the end of the day, as conservatives, if we want to cast a winning vision to bring people in, we have to talk about also what we're for. And so I've got a piece that's coming out for the Freeman newsletter. Where basically it's like, how do we cast a conservative vision? Well, here's the thing. Let's bring back the idea of encouraging, like, our young men to have adventure, to go out and seek adventure, let's have programs to get them hooked up for apprenticeships with SpaceX to explore space. Like, listen, there are some things that Elon Musk does that worry me a little bit, the transhumanist stuff. But I like Elon Musk. I think his vision of wanting to explore space, like, that's fascinating. The idea, and Matt harps on this all the time, the idea that, like, you can talk about space travel and people's eyes glaze over is wild to me. Like, it is the one thing left that we don't know hardly anything about. And most people are like, well, I don't know, let me go back to TikTok. I'm like, what are you doing? Come on. Like, get that spirit of Lewis and Clark, of Christopher Columbus, all the men that the liberals are trying to tear down their statues of. Let's put their statues back up and let's get some of their spirit. I don't know.
Well, it goes back. It goes back to an episode we did early on the Gio and Joey show, when we were talking about J.D. Unwin's study on sex and culture. And there is that phase, right, when when a nation begins to lose its desire to explore, when it is being dumbed down and numbed down by entertainment and by free time and by hedonism, then the decline of the nation is inevitable. And that's what these guys are lamenting, because now you have people who do stupid stuff on TikTok and YouTube. They might get themselves killed. There was this young man in England who was going into people's houses unannounced, and he got arrested for it and things like that. And you see people do dumb things in videos. And so we need to get back to where we're taking our creative energies and changing this country for the better. But we have become so complacent. I saw a meme a couple of days that talked about the fall of the Roman Empire had to do with entertaining the masses as the infrastructure broke down all around them. And obviously it showed the Roman Colosseum and then the Super Bowl, right? Everybody's watching that. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, where we have hyperinflation. They're trying to take away our Second Amendment rights. We don't know when the housing mortgage rates are going to come down. People are suffering, layoffs in massive place, unemployment, and yet people are worried about all-star games, football, and no offense to Ben Shapiro and Tim McDonald, songs that really don't matter.
Hey, that was the number one. That song changed the culture, I'm telling you. They came from Megan Thee Stallion. The
Stallion. I know the way he said. Let's continue with this video. Hold on. There you go.
We're denying that the moon landing even happened.
Right.
I'm not trying to rope Candace into a debate.
Listen, if you want to burn your fan base, it's cool. Okay. If you want to do it again. If you want to do it again. You just don't know your base. It's cool.
Did. But so I think that's part of it. Like this turning back on our greatest achievements. And saying, that never.
Wait a minute. Does Matt or which one of them don't believe we landed on the moon?
Candace doesn't, and she's totally wrong. The moon landing is one of the greatest achievements of humankind, and it's an American win. So I'm totally with Matt on this one. The moon landing happened.
All right, let me push back. Let me push back a little. Not that I believe we landed on the moon, but let me push back a little. Why haven't we gone back then?
Well, here's the thing, and Matt actually has talked about this endlessly on his podcast. It's actually the perfect example of a government project, right? In other words, what is a government project can come along and it can put a lot of effort for a time into doing a remarkable thing, and then the bureaucracy kills it, right? And it just doesn't. Which is why, what has it taken to restart the space project? It's taken American entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah,
Elon Musk, Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos. They've got a vision for it now. They're carrying the torch, right? If we'd have opened this up to private investment and to private companies back in the 60s, heck, maybe we'd be on Mars now. And I will say one thing as a Christian. I don't know how far God will let us get into the heavens. It could be that, especially if there is some other life, like unfallen life, that maybe God is not going to allow us. But here's the thing. God created us in his image to be fruitful and multiply and to explore his creation. So until he puts that stop there, we should push into the unknown. We should want to understand God's creation. When I look at space travel and all of the stuff we've learned from it, I just see more evidence for the awesome God that we have, for the creator. So, because that is one thing I'll see some Christians say, that to shoot for the stars or the space travel, it's, what do they say? It's
heretical?
Not heretical, but like it's presuming, it's presumptuous.
Presumptuous, yeah.
And like, I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah, I believe our whole solar system, if we can grasp it, then we can go for it, right? Now, I doubt it will ever get to, beyond Mars. I think Mars is possible, but I doubt we get beyond that, right? First of all, planets like Jupiter are gas, not really solid, and things like that. But yeah, let's explore. That's what's missing, and I think that's what this episode is talking about. That sense of adventure, to want to put something before our entertainment. right? Right now, society is all about what entertains me, what is pleasure. What about exploration? And we talk about the space, but what about the oceans? I mean, there's stuff in the bottom of the ocean that we still haven't discovered. And so that would be exciting too. That seems a little bit more dangerous.
Here's part of the problem with our culture too. What do we do to the people who try to do it? Right? So in other words, first of all, what does people always say about these billionaires who are now investing in space, right? They say, well,
they should
if
use
only
the
they
money for something better, yeah.
And I'm like, first of all, that's like a lot of the problems we have with poverty, it's not going to just be fixed by them allocating $1 billion, right? A lot of money goes to charity, and that's a good thing. We should care about the poor. But no, these things are also worth expending for. But then also think about a while back, there was that group that went down into the ocean in that whatever that contraption was.
Yeah, but that
and
wasn't.
They
Yeah,
No,
they went in
here's
a
the thing.
soda can. Come
No,
on.
it wasn't a soda can though, actually. And it was a thing, and this is the part that they always leave out of the story. That thing had gone under before, so it wasn't like this whatever.
Yeah, it wasn't the first time.
And rather than mock these people, like listen, their deaths are tragic, but rather than mock them, but we should build statues to them for the fact that they were willing to take this leap on behalf of mankind, on trying something new. And yes, it was just going down to the Titanic, but it was, can we go down in this? Is there a way for us to explore the depths of the ocean? Listen,
I don't deny
them.
I don't deny them going down, and obviously it is heroic. But man, from some of the stuff I read, I mean, they had an Xbox controller controlling this thing. Can we put a little bit more into it than just a video game console control?
But I mean, Columbus set sail right on and not the greatest fleet in the world to go into what most people at the day believed was going to fall off the edge of the earth, right? And yet he did it, right? He did it for
but look,
God and country and.
But speaking of the Titanic, though, James Cameron went down in better vehicles, right? And so I think that's where this guy gets criticized, that he didn't put as much as he could in building his little vehicle. That being said, mad props to him exploring. Let's keep going here with this video.
Yeah, I think something that's self-justifying. Meaning, I think that since we foreclosed the thing, now we're justifying to ourselves as a society why the thing is impossible.
Yeah, because we can't go to the moon. They certainly couldn't have gone to the moon.
Right.
Because we're better than them.
And also, we shouldn't go to the moon.
Just to go back to what you were saying before, it's not a knock on capitalism.
They've always
been a knock on capitalism. It's something else more. This is outside of the values that underlie capitalism, because without the values, capitalism is just selling fentanyl, basically. It's like, it doesn't matter what you're selling. But you can't continue to build on the same space forever. You start to build inward. When they say, oh, in order for our economy to thrive, we need more consumerism, that's degrading. It's degrading to the human spirit.
Yes.
That's not how you build a society. After a while, I don't want to buy anything. Maybe I just want to live my life.
I have enough stuff.
You've got to move. You've got to move.
For a guy who loves Frank Sinatra, you miss the most important thing that he left us with. It wasn't the music. It was the quote. Whoever dies with the most stuff wins.
The thing we're missing too, one is the kind of a good, I agree, I got too much stuff, man. It's coming out of the kind of a good that you actually do want to continue to consume is the kind of good that you set on fire.
Yeah.
That you burn and then puff because the body's
almost like a cigar. Yeah,
almost like a Mayflower. The thing that we're missing though is, I agree, expanding commerce is a wonderful thing. It's nice to have material goods. It's actually necessary for a...
it's not just nice. I mean...
Yeah, no, it's actually necessary to sustain your life. But the thing we're missing when we talk about American exploration and broader Western exploration is that I think we kind of buy into the left's argument a little bit, which is that they just undertook these great conquests for money. They just did it for plunder. And they didn't, actually.
That's right.
I'm a big defender of Columbus, and I know the guy, maybe he did some bad things, but he was not motivated only or even primarily by money. The man was trying to fund another crusade, okay? The American...
One of the great heroes of...
One of the great heroes of the West, ever. I don't think that Charles Martel was motivated primarily by greed. Okay, I don't think Jan Sobieski was motivated primarily by greed. I don't think the American founding fathers were. Almost all of them were impoverished because of the revolution.
Neil Armstrong, for that matter,
or Neil Armstrong, or any of these guys. Many of them were undertaking colonial endeavors to spread the faith. they were doing it for the good of everyone. I mean, there are politically incorrect poems written to this effect about the conquests in the Philippines, but they really thought that they were doing good for people, and I think they really were doing good for people. And when you lose that part of it, when you lose a sense of mission for the purpose of man, for what can be done when there is peace on earth and how we can flourish, then you're just left with buying more stuff, and that is degrading.
The spirit that gets into a shoe.
I think that's a good point he makes. And even for us here in this show, right? We got to do this show for the passion of what we care about and not worry about, monetizing or stuff. Hopefully that comes. But when we do it for the passion, it ignites something in us. And I think that's what's missing. And I think they go later on to talk about Elon Musk. How the man's already have more money than most, right? Yet he's still exploring, still doing things because there's a passion to be curious, and that's what we need to be.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so they talked about this some before, and they were kind of bringing it back to capitalism. I appreciate Ben Shapiro in this regard because there's a tendency in some parts of the right to start criticizing capitalism. They say because, well, like Drew was saying, and by the way, Drew's point was 100% correct, is that capitalism can lead to consumerism. But that's the whole thing. So Adam Smith is kind of the OG of kind of free market economics, right? Well, before he wrote his book, The Wealth of Nations, he wrote another smaller book called A Theory of Moral Sentiments. So in other words, listen, and this is the point Ben brought out earlier. He's like, listen, I'm a three cheers for American capitalism guy. Because a lot of people, right, will say, well, 2 cheers for American capitalism. But Ben was saying, like, listen, capitalism is in an economic box. And in that box, it is a great thing. It is, but to Drew's point, capitalism can't dictate your values, right? Because, listen, yeah, you can sell fentanyl, you can sell pornography in some way, right? Prostitution can be a form of capitalism. But no, if you have this theory of moral sentiments correct, right? Like what our founders called, what John Adams, sorry, called, right, the Christian morality that lies at the base of kind of our constitutional order. If you have that, then yes, capitalism is the greatest economic system to ever be invented on this earth. It's lifted more people out of poverty than anything. And to the point of this discussion, right, it can fund that spirit, right? In other words, yes, okay, not most of us can't go to space, right? Although we should cheer on those that do. Most of us can't jump in a rickety dink and go down to the bottom of the ocean. But what's the American dream? Well, we can put some effort in and start a business, right? Create some new product or service to make people's lives better, and also our families' lives better by the wealth it creates. So, listen, ordered correctly, capitalism can help fulfill that spirit of adventure. So that's just what I liked about this part of the conversation.
Yep, let's continue here.
Columbus did in sails across the ocean blue is bigger than the spirit that builds Amazon.com. It's wonderful that there's Amazon.com. It's wonderful that there's entrepreneurs and all these things. It's fantastic. It's not a knock on them to say you also have to get into a shoebox and go someplace and you do it for spiritual reasons.
Well, or danger that they went through to do it. I mean, just thinking about the journey that they made, not knowing if there was anything there.
Yeah, there was anything there. Yeah.
You think about Cortez conquering the Aztec Empire with a ragtag group of
one of the great men of history.
Right, right, and yeah, I mean, first of all, being motivated partially by resources and you got to get gold, like there's nothing ignoble about that to begin with, but that alone is not going to drive men.
Right.
I mean, especially you think about what they had to do. You're getting on a ship and going into an unknown ocean. You have no idea. You could easily die on the way. The idea that you would do that just to turn a profit is
no, I mean, again, I totally agree with this. When I say 3 cheers for capitalism, because capitalism is in the economic box, that is the mechanism by which you can actually effectuate this sort of stuff. But the person in the modern world, so let's look at the modern world. I mean, there's really only one direction to go, and that's up, which is what Elon Musk is doing. But all the borders have been drawn. Every land has been discovered. There's no uncharted land. We have satellites. Like, we know where everything is at this point. So the question is, what is the modern man to do if he has that exploratory instinct? And this is why I come back to the idea that the difference maybe no one can be Columbus anymore because you can't unless you're going to actually get in a rocket and go to Mars or something. But barring that, barring like the 3 people on Earth who are going to be able to actually try that, you're just a normal guy. It used to be a normal guy would pick up his stuff in New York and then just start going until they found wilderness. But there's no more wilderness.
Right.
Okay, so what exactly does that guy do? And the answer is, in fact, that he can still combine the desire to do good for people and the desire to serve a holier purpose with commerce.
Yeah.
That is still
Well,
there.
no,
It's just,
nobody's
you
knocking
can't
commerce.
get in a covered wagon and do it. I mean, there's just
Right.
I love that point that Ben made there, right? We have to become creative. Yes, there's no Wild West anymore. There's no unexplored, lands. But there is still untapped opportunity. And we have to begin to think outside the box and learn to do things creatively. Put our energies in things that will benefit not only your spirit of exploration and accomplishment, but by and large can benefit society too.
And the thing is, as conservatives, we used to realize this better than anybody, right? In other words, what defeated the Soviet Union ultimately was the fact that, listen, while their military was strong, because that's where they focused all of their attention, they couldn't compete with us in anything else, right? They couldn't make better cars. They couldn't make, right? Because we allowed people to be free, and we allowed them to be free economic agents. Like, nobody could beat us in the 20th century has been called the American century for a reason, because we allowed people to be free, we beat everybody. We kicked economic butt, right? But I think part of the problem is I don't know if you saw that interview Tucker Carlson did with Putin. Now, Putin's
Yes,
an
I did.
awful
I
person.
did.
Putin is an awful person, and his history, let's just say it's
Debatable.
misleading. It's misleading to say the best thing I could say about it. But what I got from that interview, one thing was he and the case he makes to his people is that he sees Russia and Russian people in a lineage of Russian people, right? In other words, he sees the past and he uses that as justification for the present, right? Well, Americans, we used to do that as well. We used to have American presidents who could go back and talk about the great deeds of our past, and so talk about the chain that led us to where we are and the freedoms that we have. We don't really do that anymore as a society. We
Well,
don't.
actually, on the opposite, what we do is try to whitewash our past and try to take down statues and try to take down our history and forget what struggles we had as a nation that gives us that spirit of, yes, we can do, right? That nothing is too tough for the American ideal to do things the way we want to see them done. And so that is why history is so important. And that's why we can't let people negate the history, good and bad, of this country that has made us who we are today. You and I are the sum of the choices we made in the past, and we learned from that and tried to correct that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like I said, and this is the biggest thing that I think conservatives can add to our public conversation. Let's remind our young people, right? Let's give them a civic education. Let's remind them where we came from as Americans. Back to our discussion from earlier about immigration, when we bring legal immigrants in, let's make them a part of our American tradition and the tradition handed down to us from our founding fathers, from the Magna Carta, right, in Great Britain, right, which really birthed a lot of these ideas.
Yeah. And look, this video that you showed, let's show a little bit more and then we'll end with a little fun.
There's no kind of so good way.
Although I do think one interesting thing about what Elon Musk is doing is that his rocket ship, Starship, which is meant to go to Mars, doesn't seat 3 people; it seats 100 people.
Yeah,
and he refers to it as a wagon. That he sees it in the same way that those wagons were in the West. That I think that
By the way,
Elon Musk could very well screw all of this up. He's a human being, and God has a funny way of knocking men down when they try to reach too high. But right now, Elon Musk is probably the greatest living human. I don't know if he's a good man, but certainly a great man. And his actual desire is not to see a man walk on Mars. His desire is to send hundreds and hundreds of ships.
And in the
He's
same-
By the way,
maintaining
in the
hundreds-
same way, not everybody has
having,
to-
having spent some time with him, I can tell you
Yeah.
that the thing that is motivating him is not the money. He's got the money.
Right.
That's not what motivated
That's
him
right.
to
Got all
start
the money.
SpaceX. SpaceX was built as a profit-making vehicle specifically so he could do the thing.
And-
Which, by the
and-
way, is
and the same way,
that's
by the
true of most great entrepreneurs. Most great entrepreneurs are driven by doing the thing,
Right.
and they have to make the money in order to do the thing.
Right.
It's not that they do it in order to make. In fact, this is good business advice for pretty much anybody because we get a lot of people who ask us these questions. One of the biggest mistakes people make is they say, "I will do it for the money." If you say you'll do it for the money, you're not going to do it. Okay, you're not going to
right.
enjoy it.
That's-
You're not going
no,
to like
you're
it,
right.
and it's actually
And you're not gonna get there,
The reason all of us here do the things that we do is because we have a sense of mission about it, and the money is a good byproduct that helps incentivize us to continue the mission. But it's not the reason that we do the thing. We don't do the thing for the money. And so for Elon, Elon has this very interesting sort of thesis. He's not a religious person, but there's sort of a quasi-religious justification of what he's doing. He thinks that, effectively speaking, the reason so his sort of guidebook is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? He talks very frequently about this, and the punchline of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is what's the meaning of the universe, and they put it in the machine,
yeah.
and the machine says 42, and he said, and then it says you're just asking the wrong questions, right? The punchline is you're just asking the wrong questions. The answer is 42, and so Elon's entire shtick is that, and his entire kind of way of thinking is that the only way that we can actually discover the meaning of life is to ask the right questions. The only way that you can discover the right questions is to broaden out the number of humans and the number of places those humans are in order, he kind of sees human beings, I would say, almost like neurons in a giant brain almost. And so the idea is that if you expand human consciousness onto other planets, or you put humans in different places, and there are more humans, you have more kids, then you're actually going to be asking better questions about that. You may not like that, you may think that's stupid, but that's the thing that's actually driving it.
But to tie everything we've been talking about together, to go back to Candace's point about the way men are built, one of the things that happens to men much more powerfully than it does in women is that when we watch something, the same places in our brain light up as the person who's doing it. So when you and I watch football, we have the experience of playing football in our brains. So you don't have to, not everybody has to go to Mars. If 100 people go to Mars, we all go to Mars. And that's one of the things that is inspiring to men, and they see it, and it gives meaning to everything. I grew up in the time of the space age, and it gave meaning to the world. We all thought, oh, we are going to the moon. And we watched that guy walk on the moon, and we all walked on the moon.
It is an amazing distinction between boys and girls, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? Like I have 2 boys and 2 girls, and my oldest is super duper smart, like reads at high school level and all this kind of stuff. But when she's talking about space, it's not the same way as my 7-year-old son. My 7-year-old son, when he looks at videos of rockets or when he's watching, like he will literally sit there and just watch documentaries about rockets because you can see him just absolutely light up in a fundamentally different way.
My boys
because
like this.
Yeah, they watch
it's
the truck.
amazing. It's
They
amazing.
watch the truck.
Watch the truck. I'm like, dude, I don't want to look at the garbage truck. Go find your
They love,
dad.
they love the garbage
The
truck.
freaking garbage
They
truck
love the
is
garbage-
like,
Oh, the garbage
garbage
truck.
man
Isn't
is
that
a
weird?
hero.
And that's interesting, the difference. And that's why God created man and woman, male and female. He made us different for a reason, and it's a good reason.
Yeah. So, as conservatives right now, because a lot of the elite institutions are right against us, right? So we think of like the Davos crowd who wants, you will eat the bugs and you will live in the pod, you will own nothing and you will be happy, right? So that tends to be that crowd. That's one of the reasons why I like Elon. Even though he's not a Christian, I think he should convert. I think he should accept Christ. But what I like about him is he's pro-human, right? In other words, he's pro having kids, right? Even the space stuff that he does, his long-term goal is because he wants more space for people. So he's pro-human, and I like that, right? In a world of elites that seem to be anti-human in favor of Mother Nature Gaia crap, right? He's pro-human, and I like that. And so I hope he converts, but I like what he's doing. So ending on this video before we jump into the other thing you want to do, my last thing was, and I think what kind of ties this together is I think the church can have a role in giving people a mission and a sense of we can do something, right? Because we do have a mission that we were given by our Savior, right? Right? The Great Commission, go everywhere, baptizing everyone of every nation, tribe, and tongue, right? Teaching them to observe all the things that Christ gave us, all the commands. So that's one thing. And listen, so this sweatshirt that I got, I kind of alluded to this before, but in our church, right, in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, one thing that our union is doing, it's a union here in the Midwest, one thing that they're trying to do, and they've been doing this for several years, is they're trying to get all of the young people in our union together and inspire them and empower them with funds from the church to start ministries in their local community. And so, listen, this is a place where we can get the young people engaged in something greater than themselves, in a mission, in something adventurous, even. And so that's why I think Christians should be speaking to this moment. There's a quote I love, which says, "An army of youth rightly trained," and I forget the exact wording of the quote, but basically would finish the work of the gospel like that. And again, this is a very loosely paraphrased, but so yeah, that's, I
Yeah,
think
well,
we can
exactly.
inspire
Look,
the mission.
we need to forego, in essence, what the country needs is to forego this incessant desire to be entertained and develop a passion to explore what God has given us to do. And that doesn't mean that all of us have to be preachers, but we can discover new truths in mathematics, in space exploration, ocean exploration, Antarctica exploration. You know, how to solve different societal needs if we just put our collective brains to do something positive and not just be entertained. That being said, let's entertain ourselves with this. Look, this is hilarious. And then I'll tell you what my initial reaction was when I first saw it.
Let's look at the stats. I've got the facts. My money like Lizzo, my pockets are fat. Homie, I'm epic. Don't be a whap. Dog, it's a yarmulke. Homie, no cap. Look at the graphs. Look at my.
How far do you want me to go back?
Start from the beginning. If we're gonna do this, we got to go full rap maven, right?
No, I don't want to watch the whole thing.
Wizards.
You want to watch the whole
okay.
thing? Nah,
Let's at least start at the beginning and go to from the beginning to the end of Ben's verse.
Yeah, okay, here we go. We're about to jump in bed.
Let's look at the stats. I've got the facts. My money like Lizzo, my pockets are fat. Homie, I'm epic. Don't be a whap. Dog, it's a yarmulke. Homie, no cap. Look at the graphs. Look at my charts. You're blowing money on strippers and cars. You going to prison, I'm on television. Dog, no one knows who you are. Keep hating on me on the internet. My comment section all woke Karens. And I make racks off compound interest. Y'all live with your parents. Nikki, take some notes. I just did this for fun. All my people, download this. Let's get a Billboard #1.
This ain't rap. This ain't money, cars and clothes. We ain't selling drugs, we ain't.
Yo, when I first saw that, I thought it was some sort of spoof. And then I forgot where I went. I think I went on. No, I went straight to Apple Music to see if this was legit. And there it was. And look, he did a good job. It's funny, though. Some of the comments I've seen is people laughing that he's rapping slower than he talks. What was your initial thought? Did you think it was legit at first?
So I follow Tom McDonald and Ben on Twitter. So Tom McDonald had said he was going to be dropping a song with Ben Shapiro. So I knew it was a real thing. But when I watched it, man, so I actually have taken Ben's clip, recorded it, turned it into a ringtone on my phone.
Oh, wow.
But no, listen, obviously the thing was meant to be a troll. But like they were the #1 rap song in the country, right? And the thing I love about Tom McDonald, just in general, is listen. I'm not exactly a rap aficionado, but what I like about him is like he's not just giving up his genre that he came up in to the degenerates and to the people, you know, degrade women and promote violence. Like he's actually pushing out good values. If you want to go back to see a reaction video. Gio and I did to his song "End of the World." You can go check that out.
Oh, that was him when we did that?
Yeah, that was Tom McDonald. Yeah.
Okay, I don't remember that. Look, another thing. One of the lines that Tom says, "We're not going to turn your children into thugs and your men into thugs and your women into women of the night." And that's unfortunately when you listen to artists like Eminem and Dre and Ice Cube and Snoop Dogg, because I used to listen to that, DMX. That's all they do. They degrade society. And even though I'm not a big fan of the rap genre anymore, at least try to do something positive with it. And that's what I actually thought Ben's lyrics were a little bit more risque than Tom's actual lyrics, talking about Lizzo, my money like Lizzo, my pockets are fat. That's hilarious.
Well, you have to know So Ben's rap career actually begun with him reading the lyrics to Cardi B's song
WAP.
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 It was
Yeah, I
probably
know.
the most famous rap rendition of all time. And then I saw some people who basically put it to music, Ben reading it.
Yeah,
It,
okay.
it was funny.
All right, brother. We've gone. This is the longest we've done a live. We are an hour and 9 minutes. Yeah, let me let you have the last word before we sign off here.
Yeah, so I think this was fitting, right, for the episode that we did, right? In other words, do something, right? In other words, we don't have to, our fate does not have to be controlled from the top down, right? We are Americans. So going back to the French, we have the, like, as a free people, we have the right to stand up for our right to self-defense. So call your congressman, but bringing it all together is like, as a free people, our destinies are not determined by some central planners in Washington D.C. or Davos, Switzerland, right? We are made in the image of God, and so let's go out and let's do big and great things. Let's shoot for the stars or Mars, or let's go to the bottom of the ocean. Maybe have a little bit more planning than the guys in the rinky dink thing, but like, let's do that. Let's do stuff like
Yes.
that. Let's
Yes.
go explore the Yukon, right? Let's, more than anything, I would say, let's win our cities for Jesus Christ. Let's fulfill the Great Commission. Let's do big and bold things. Let's build new institutions. Let's do stuff. That's my thing.
Yes, and that's a good word to end, right? And I will say this, let's stop living in a society that's all about entertain me, and let's be explorers once again to drive this country and ourselves to new heights. Until next time in the Gio and Joey show, be blessed. Have a good night.